Hi everyone, welcome back to Total War Therapy, and it's Christmas today. I'm making this video because it's the day of the Resurrected, and that's why we're gonna see the full roster of the Vampire Counts, any single units, their stats, what they're good at, how they perform in battle, and at the end we're gonna decide if they are worth to recruit just for fun or situational or niche. So don't forget to subscribe if you enjoy my video, and let's begin. Hi, I'm Alberto, I'm a real person, and here you will find the beginner's guide, the battle unit roster, tier list, ranking, and many shorts. So if you wanna support the channel, please consider to subscribe. Let's start with the Legendary Lords, and over the campaign you will unlock many different abilities and bonuses that we will not address all in this video, because we will just try to quickly summarize what they are good at, so you can decide if they are your best pick. The first Legendary Lord is Mannfred von Carstein, that is both a melee specialist and a spellcaster, and honestly he's very good at both of them. The armor is great, the speed is okay, the melee attack is impressive, the melee defense is also good, the weapon strength is high, but unfortunately not armor piercing, that it's probably his only weakness. And as a spellcaster he will get access to the Lord of Magic of the Vampires and the Lord of Magic of Death, that combined together it can be a great selection. And as a mount he can ride the horse, the flying horse, and at the end the zombie dragon. With the next DLC he will get access to another very nice ride that I'm looking forward to see, but for now that it is, and it's probably one of the strongest Legendary Lord in the entire game, so with him you can always feel safe. The second Legendary Lord is Vlad von Carstein, that again is both a spellcaster and a melee specialist, but compared to Mannfred he's a better melee specialist and a lesser spellcaster. He will get access to only the Lord of Magic of the Vampires, but as a melee specialist he will get the armor piercing damage on foot, he will get no mount, so you cannot get any ride for him, and he will get an ability that is the only one that I would like to mention because it's linked to the lore of the end times, that is the Carstein Ring, that will grant more damage resistance. And I can make this spoiler to you, basically in the end times he will try to give it to Isabella von Carstein, his wife, to let her survive, but at the end he will not be successful. Then we have Isabella von Carstein, that she's the wife of Vlad, but they will play the same campaign, just depending on which Legendary Lord you will pick, the other will be the Legendary Hero, but they will be together in the same campaign and there is no way to split them. Now, compared to Vlad, she will lose the armor piercing damage on foot, but she will get more melee defense, sacrificing a little of melee attack. As a spellcaster, she will get access again to the lore of magic of the vampires. She will get access also to two different mounts, the horse and the flying horse. And then one ability that I should mention is the Blood Chalice of Batory, that basically will grant her some replenishment to her or to some other lords and heroes over the battlefield, because yeah, it's wine and you know that the wine will make you live longer. Then we have Heinrich Kemmler, that is a great necromancer that I don't remember if you need the DLC, the Grim and the Grave, to play with him, but I guess not, I don't remember, it was a long time ago. In any case, he's my favorite Legendary Lord in this roster. As I said, he's a very powerful necromancer that will get many abilities linked to the resurrections of his units, and he will get access to the lore of magic of the vampires. To the as a mount he will get the horse, and an important ability is the Cloak of Mist and Shadows, that will grant to him a physical resistance of the 75%. In any case, as you know, one of the main features of this lord is that he will be able to summon the Lord of the Undeath, that is Krell, that I don't know what will happen to him in the next DLC, the Lord of the End Times, because he's one of the Mortarchs, so probably he he will have a greater role, and I think that he will be a full legendary hero, but we will talk about this a little later. In any case, yes, I think it's the best legendary lord here. Is not that strong as all the others, and you know, this makes the campaign a little more you know, playable and not power creep. Then we have Helmandgorst, that in this case you definitely need to buy the DLC, the Grim and the Grave, that, I mean, I already talked about that, no, I didn't already, yeah, I mean, in your perspective, I still haven't, so we will talk about this later. In any case, he's another spellcaster, not that great in melee. He will get as a mount the Brothers Gorst corpse cart that, I mean, it's just a corpse cart that it's a kind of a support war machine that, again, we will talk about this later in the video. And he has an ability called the Liber Noctus that you will cause damage to yourself, but you will increase your power recharge of the 240%, and then other abilities linked to the resurrections, the lore of the vampires, and many stuff like that. In any case, as I said, it's not that great in melee, so avoid it as much as you can. And at the end we have the Red Duke that I lost my hopes to see him as a legendary lord in this game. I think it will never happen, unfortunately. In any case, yeah, it's just a vampire lord with access to some steeds like the horse, the flying horse, and the zombie dragon that I have to say that is probably the best dragon in the entire game about the aesthetics. He will get access to the lore of the vampires again, and other abilities not that unique. He's a great melee specialist, but without the armor piercing damage. In addition, he will get some, I mean, the shield to be more protected from the missile attacks, and still the melee attack is very high, so I think he would be a great pick as a legendary lord, but unfortunately we still haven't got him. The only legendary hero that he's still not a legendary hero is Krell, but probably, as I said, in the next DLC, the Lord of the End Times, we will get him as a legendary hero, at least for the campaign of Kemmler. I don't know about the other legendary lords. In any case, he's strictly linked to Kemmler, so this is what I expect. He's a great melee specialist. He has a very great axe that is armor piercing, and with the anti-large bonus, a lot of armor. The speed is very low, so don't expect him to reach far distances. The melee attack is great, and the melee defense also. He has magical attacks and the sundered armor that will reduce the armor of the enemies that he's fighting with. A good charge bonus that it's not that clear why with this speed, and I mean many abilities that for now at least are not that unique. For now you can summon him only with the Kemmler, but as I said, we will see later what will happen. This is something new that I'm doing in this series, so tell me in the comment if you like, but I thought that since the lore of the vampires is strictly related to the faction of the vampire counts, it deserved to be addressed here. So let's just talk quickly about all the spells. The first one is the Vanel Dance Macabre, that is a boost of the speed and the melee attack with a range of 200 meters. It's a very cheap spell, but still, I don't like that much the kind of buffs to only one unit. That's why I don't like it that much. Then we have the invocation of Neek, that will replenish and resurrect the dead combats of one particular unit with a heal per second of almost 1% and a range of 200. This is not that bad, but of course you have to pick the right unit if you want to make it useful. Then we have the Raise Dead that will summon a unit of zombies, and this is probably the best spell because it's very cheap with a lot of uses, and it can be very helpful in many different situations, like when there is a spellcaster that is being attacked, when you need extra mid shield in one areas. So yeah, I mean, I think that it's a very great one. Then we have the Gates of Nagash. That is a magic missile that honestly I don't like magic missiles in this game, but I have to say that this one is particularly great if you use it against the right combatant. And I mean, probably you should focus more on the single entities, the cavalry and so on. Then we have the Curse of the Years that you will use to silence and reduce the speed and the melee attack of an area of enemies. That is great for me. It's just a little expensive, but not that much. Of course, it's better if you use it in the area where there is the spellcaster, because you will silence the spells and the abilities. And then at the end, the Wind of Death. That is a wind particularly expensive and honestly not that strong as many others. That's why I think is about the cost effectiveness is probably the worst spell of this lore. And I mean, overall I like this lore of magic, but it's not my favorite. Okay, I think that there are far better options that the vampire counts have access to, like the lore of shadows, the lore of death. So I may suggest you to prefer this, even if most of the legendary lords and heroes will get access only to this. In any case, that's my opinion. So let's get back to the unit. Now let's talk about the generic lord options, and the first one will be the Master Necromancer. Now, they will get access only to the lore of magic of the vampires. That it's not my favorite, it's terrible, you can believe me. I think that they will rework it with the DLC of Nagash, or at least I hope so. This is both a support character and a spellcaster. He will get access to some mounts, for example the horse and the corpse cart. I think that overall is not that great. The second lord option will be the Vampire Lord, that he's both a melee specialist and a spellcaster, again with access only to the lore of magic of the vampires, so not the best spells, but at least now you can mount a flying horse and a zombie dragon. That can be quite powerful in the mid to late game, even because there are some additional abilities. And then he has a lot of armor. He got the shield, so you can send it as the front line to absorb all the missile damage of the enemy, or you can just put it in the middle of the enemy formation to absorb all the damage of the units, to bait them and then cause a big bombardment with your spells. So I think you have plenty of option. Unfortunately, it doesn't have the armor piercing damage, but I mean, it will get it with the zombie dragon, so don't worry. For me, it's the best option amongst the generic ones that you have without the DLC. So for me, a must to recruit unit. Now I will quickly show you all the versions of the Vampire Lord that you can get in your campaign with some special mechanics. First we have the Blood Dragon that will sacrifice the shield and little of melee defense to get more charge and anti-infantry bonus, together with the Frenzy that will increase the stats when the leadership is higher than the 50%. Then we get the Lamian, so the Neferata's sisters, that for some reasons they will have the best melee defense amongst all the characters, and they will have a selection of spells from both the lore of magic of vampires and the lore of shadows, that for me it's far better. Then we have the Necrarch that will be the worst in melee, so you should probably use it only as a spellcaster, and it will get a weird selection of spells from many lores of magic, the one of the vampires, the one of death, the one of beast, and so on. But yes, not the worst option. Then we have the von Carstein, that will be the most similar to the generic version. He will keep the shield, but he will got different spells, so not only from the lores of the vampires, but also some spells from the lore of the beast. And at the end we have the Strigoi Vampire Lord, that will have very little armor and but a huge melee attack with the poison effect, a weapon strength very high with armor piercing damage, and then it will be the only character able to ride a Terrorgeist, that it's a flying monster that we will address later, with a selection of spells from the lore of the vampires and from the lore of death. Now let's talk about the generic heroes in the Vampire Counts roster, and let's start with the Banshee. The Banshee is a duelist, it's a great one actually. It has 0 armor but the 55% of physical resistance, so she will ignore half of the physical damage by the enemy. The speed is great for of course for an infantry, for a character on foot. The melee attack and the melee defense are quite high with the magical attacks, with the frostbite that will reduce the speed of the enemies. The weapon strength is not that big, but at least it's armor piercing. And then yes, I mean there will be many abilities that will boost her melee stats, and I think that overall it's great. Of course, if you like this kind of characters, that it's definitely not me, but yes, if you want just to sneak around and try to attack the enemy lord or a spellcaster at the back, it's the great unit, but for me it's just situational. Then we have the White King, that is the melee specialist amongst the heroes. In this case he is better at absorbing damage rather than dealing damage. He got plenty of armor with the shield, so it's a very good tank. You can put it in the middle of the enemy army, or you can you know, send it as the front line to absorb all the missile attacks of the enemies, but it doesn't have the armor piercing damage, so it's not a very good a very good duelist, and it has many abilities that will increase its melee stats. Overall not that bad, but depends what you're looking for, because the melee lords of the Vampire Counts roster, they're actually very great combatants and tanks, because they have plenty of regeneration, so I don't know how much it can be useful, so for me just situational. Then we have the Necromancer, that is the first spellcaster option amongst the heroes. He will get access only to the lore of magic of the vampires, that I have to say that it's not my favorite at all, and he will get access to some mounts as well, for example the horse and the corpse cart. We can say that he's also a support character, but yeah, definitely not my favorite, both for the lore of magic and for the kind of use that you will do in the battle. That's why for me, I'm sorry to say that, but it's just for fun unit. And then as a last hero and the second spellcaster option, we get the Vampire, that they will get access to a couple of lores of magic, the lore of death and the lore of shadows, that let me say it, they are far better than the lore of the vampires. I mean, we're talking about very great spells in this case, and then they will be able to ride both the horse and the flying horse, so you can use them in a very versatile way. You can send them to target some characters or some cavalry, to debilitate some artillery piece. They will be quite elusive, and then they have the hunger, so they will replenish their hit points when they are engaged in melee, and many different abilities. So for me they are the ultimate spellcaster option, and definitely amongst all the heroes the only must to recruit unit, even if probably you will already have a spellcaster as a lord, so it will be a little redundant. Now let's talk about melee infantry, and this unit will be your filler for the entire campaign, and it's even the most accessible unit because you will be able to recruit as many of them as you want thanks to the undead mechanics. I'm talking about the zombies that are basically a meat shield, so 0 armor. The stats are not even worth to mention. I mean, the melee attack of 5, melee defense of 6, it's truly unbelievable, but at least they cause fear, so they will be able to scare some low leadership melee infantry, and then they are 160 entities. That it's probably one of the largest units of the game, and that's why they make they do their job very, very well. Okay, they will invalidate the charge of a cavalry, they will protect the weakest units like the necromancers or the corpse cards, for example. And yeah, I think they are good. The only problem is that the skeletons warriors are better than them. They are actually good at something, and for that price you can easily replace them. So that's why for me the zombies are just situational. Then we have the skeleton warriors that are the upgraded version of the zombies. They have some armor, the shields, so they will be more protected against missile attacks. Their stats are actually better, I mean more than 3 times the ones of the zombies, and yes, they still cause fear, and they're still 160 entities. So a very great meat shield, probably better than the zombies, even if the price it's 3 times more. But for me they're just for fun, and I will explain you why in just a few seconds. Now, the Skeleton Spearmen are probably one of the best unit of Total War Warhammer 2. I don't know if you remember, but basically in Total War Warhammer 2 they have no upkeep. I mean, all the Skeleton Warriors, but the Spearmen were better. So with no upkeep, you were able to build entire armies full of Skeleton Spearmen, and you could just spawn them because they had no cost. So you could create as many as you want, and that's why they were so awesome. But with Total War Warhammer 3 they took off this, so now they have, even if it's very little, they have their upkeep, so you cannot recruit many armies together. But the version with the spears, it's definitely better because they have a melee defense of 30, they have the anti-large bonus, the charge defense, the charge reflection, so I think it's the ultimate filler for your army. I think that any of your armies, even in the late game, should get some of them, even just to protect the flanks and the rear guard. And yeah, that's why for me they are the most must to recruit unit of this roster. Then we have the Crypt Ghouls that are actually a very nice unit. They have some armor, their stats are better than the skeletons, they have a lot of heavy damage, even if not armor piercing, and especially against low tier melee infantry they are particularly great. And then they got the Stalk, okay, so they can move hidden and unseen all over the map. You can attack at the flank, at the back of the enemy formation. And yeah, they're great at everything, and between the early and the mid campaign, they will be the damage dealer of your army, and believe me, you can rely on them. That's why for me they are a must to recruit unit. And then we got the Cairn Wraiths that are basically ghosts. That's why they have 0 armor but 55% of physical resistance, so they will ignore half of the physical damage of the enemy. Then they have the Striders, so they will suffer no penalty caused by the terrain. About the speed, they're actually fast for an infantry. The melee attack and melee defense are not that high, but they have the armor piercing damage, and then the magical attacks and the frostbite that will reduce the speed of the enemy. They cause terror, not only fear. And yeah, overall I think they are great, both in your mid or late game army compositions, because they deal that good amount of armor piercing damage, and they're also very resistant. Of course, if you are fighting against a faction with a lot of magical units, probably they are not a good option, but yeah, overall they're great, and a couple of them, they're always good. That's why for me it's a must to recruit unit. Now let's talk about the Graveguard. That it's a subject open to debate, because many people think for their cost effectiveness that they are better than the skeletons, and other people like me think that they are not. Now let's start to say that they are very slow, okay? I'm talking about an Argo-like level, and this is not okay because the vampire counts themselves as a faction. They are not slow, okay? They have plenty of monsters, of cavalry, the characters are fast, so it's hard to manage, the rest of your army that is quite fast with this melee infantry for the late game that it's that slow. And then even if they have better stats than the skeletons, of course they have plenty of armor, even if they are less in number. At the end, I mean, they are not supposed to do that job, okay? It will be the monsters that will be the damage dealers of your army. So you don't need a strong melee infantry, and you can just save some money and recruit only the skeleton warriors. Of course, this is just my opinion, but for me they are just a for fun unit. Then there is the version with the halberds that I think they introduced this unit quite lately. I don't remember if it's this or the next one. In any case, I think they are a little better because here they have the armor piercing damage, the anti-large bonus that it's great against monsters, cavalry if they want to protect the flanks and the back. But I would say that probably they are not that necessary, because there are other options that are, large entities focused in this roster, like the Blood Knights with lances, the many monsters like the Terrorgeist, the Vargheists, and so I think that there is no reason to recruit a unit like that, and it's even quite vulnerable to, bombardment spells, artillery, and missile infantry. So I would say situational, but still, I mean, they're just for fun for me. And then there is the version with the great weapons. Here we have still the armor piercing damage, but the anti-infantry bonus instead of the anti-large. Now it's the same as the generic Graveguard for me, like they can be even good from the mid to the late game, but at the end it will be the monster being the damage dealers. That's why I would never recruit this unit. I'm sorry to say that, but for me they are just for fun unit. Now let's talk about the cavalry of the Vampire Counts roster, and the first unit are the Black Knights. That is this heavy cavalry with plenty of armor. They have the shield, so they will be more protected against missile attacks. The speed is not that great, but they have to compensate that the Strider attribute, so they will suffer no penalty caused by the terrain. The melee attack, melee defense and weapon strength are quite mid, but with the anti-infantry bonus, their charge bonus is okay. I think that overall they are not a bad unit, but probably the second alternative is better. That's why I will put them into the for fun category. The alternative to them is the Black Knights with the lances and the barding. That it's far better in my opinion, because they sacrifice a little of speed and melee defense to get more than the double of the charge bonus and the additional armor, so they will be more protected against not armor piercing attacks, and with the charge you can psycho charge the enemy from the flanks, from the back, and you will cause, believe me, plenty more of damage than the generic version. That's why I think that this is the actual cavalry that you should recruit from the early to the mid game. And they're very great for at their job, and I like them. And then we have the Hex Raids. That is a quite peculiar unit, because it's this ghost cavalry that it reminds me the cavalry from that famous scene of the Lord of the Rings. That is great because they have the physical resistance of 55%. That means that they will ignore half of the physical attacks of your enemies. That is great. The armor to compensate that is 0. The speed is 94 armor, so they are as fast as light cavalry. The melee attack, melee defense and weapon strength are quite mid, but they get the armor piercing damage, the flaming attacks, the magical attacks, and the frostbite that will reduce the speed of the enemies. And the charge bonus is quite in the middle. They have the vanguard deployment, the strider attribute. Overall, they are great against armored units, both cavalry, infantry, but even characters and monsters. The only problem, and of course their main weakness, is if they have to deal with some units with the magical attacks. So try to avoid them as much as possible and focus on the more physical units of the enemies, and you will see that they will make a very great job. So for me, they are a must to recruit unit. And as a last and most elite cavalry of this roster, we get the Blood Knights, that are actually one of the strongest and most expensive cavalry of the entire game. They are basically these vampires with plenty of armor, the same of the Black Knights with the lances and the barding. They have also the shield to be more protected against the missile attacks. The speed is quite low, but I mean, it's understandable why. The melee attack, melee defense and weapon strength is massive, especially the melee defense that makes them sturdy as an infantry. They have the anti-infantry bonus, the charge bonus is quite in the middle, and then they have the frenzy attribute that will increase their stats when the leadership is higher than the 50%, the hunger that will replenish their hit points when they are engaged in melee, and the flag of the blood keep that will increase their missile resistance when they are out of melee. Overall, they are a very great unit. They also cause fear, and yeah, I think that for your late game they are the best option, and I mean one of the best options in the game, especially in a roster that I mean, it's not that tough, we can say. They can be really your backbone, and that's why I like them so much. But for me, they are still situational, and I will explain you why in 1 second. And at the end we have the Blood Knights with lances, that compared to the generic version, they sacrifice a little of melee attack, a lot of melee defense, some weapon strength and anti-infantry bonus to get the anti-large bonus and plenty more of charge bonus. That for me is great, and they're probably better both at their job and at the job of the generic version, because yes, they have the anti-large bonus, so they will be most suitable against large entities, but with the additional charge bonus they're even better against the infantry. So even if they lose the anti-infantry bonus, with the psycho-charging strategy you can still deal far more damage than the generic version. That's why for me this is the must to recruit a unit for your late game army. The only chariot unit that we got with this roster is the Black Coach. That is a quite specific chariot with plenty of charge bonus, one of the highest of the entire game. The armor, the speed and the melee capabilities overall are okay. He got flaming attacks, magical attacks, armor piercing damage, anti-infantry bonus, the strider attribute, so it will suffer no penalty caused by the terrain, and then 3 abilities that they will boost the damage resistance, the vigor recovery and the weapon damage, and the effect of these 3 abilities will increase with each nearby enemy killed. That is great because of course a chariot will cause plenty of casualties when it charges through a melee infantry unit, for example, so you will reach at least mid of this effect quite easily, and for me, if you like the genre of the chariots, it's a very great unit, so a must to recruit. Now let's address the category of the Beast of the Vampire Counts roster, and let's start with the Fell Bats. That is basically this unit of flying little beast with literally 0 armor. They are quite fast because of course they are flying and bats, and their melee defense is especially high. Now my problem with this unit is that the leadership is very low and they are undead units, so when they will suffer a drop of their leadership, they will start to cause damage to themselves, and you can believe me, you will use them to harass or debilitate artillery pieces or missile infantry, but at some point, even if the enemies are quite weak, they will start in any case to suffer a drop of leadership and to cause damage to themselves. So you will end up to lose many of them over your campaign. And even if they are quite easy to recruit back, and there are some abilities in the campaign that allow you to do that, believe me, I mean, it's a problem, because you cannot gather experience, because yeah, you will lose them every time in any hard fight. At some point they will just be teared down, and yeah, it's not that great. But I think that at doing this job in the early to mid game, they're probably the only and the best option. That's why for me they are worth to recruit unit. In alternative, we have the dire wolves that are the ground, the little beasts. They are more entities with again 0 armor. They are a little slower, and they don't have the same melee defense. But in some way we can say they are quite, they work in the same way. They just cannot fly, so you have to circle around the enemy. They have the vanguard deployment, so you can try to hide them in a forest. And in any case, they have the strider attribute, so they will not suffer penalties caused by the terrain. Now, in my opinion, probably the fell bats are better, because even if you lose them more often, at the end they fulfill the purpose better. So I think that in my opinion they are just for fun. Then we have the Crypt Horrors, that is this monstrous infantry with not many entities, and actually the weapon strength is quite low for the standard of the monstrous infantry. They have the armor piercing damage, the poison effect that will reduce the stats of the enemy. The armor is not that great, but they have the regeneration, so they will replenish their hit points, and then they cause fear, of course. Now, this is not a bad unit, and in this roster they can be quite useful from the early to the late game. I still recruit them in the late game. I think they are good support for your melee infantry. I would not rely on them by themselves, so don't leave them alone, but they cause plenty of damage to the enemy's troops, and for me they are a great option. Then we have the Morghuls, that are actually a unit from the Vampire Coast roster, but I didn't want to make a section just for them. In any case, you have to buy the DLC if you want to play with them. They are this monstrous infantry with the stalk attribute, so they can move hidden around the map. They have the strider, the hunger, so they will replenish their hit points when they are engaged in melee. They are not that bad, even if the armor may look low, and the melee defense and melee attack are not that good. Believe me, they really do a great job. They have plenty of weapon strength with the armor piercing damage and bonus versus infantry. They have a mid charge bonus, and the frostbite that will reduce the speed of the enemy. That is great in case you are chasing down some cavalry and so on. I think overall they are a great option, and probably is worthy to buy the DLC to get them. You can use them both as a support monstrous infantry, or to just sneak around the back of the enemy and attack from there. And they're quite reliable, so they don't need a lot of babysitting. Then we have the Vargheists, that I can say they are probably one of the best units in all the undead factions. They are basically these flying monstrous infantry, but very few entities, because they are particularly strong. They have a lot of weapon strength. They have the frenzy that increases their stats when the leadership is high, the hunger that will replenish their hit points when they are engaged in melee. They have very little armor, but believe me, you will not perceive that, because they are quite resilient. Then they attack very hard, so they will cause so much damage to the enemy that at the end they will just go away, they will rout, and they will not have the time to deal damage back to you. The melee attack is quite high for this kind of unit. Of course, they are quite elite, but believe me, I think that any army of the Vampire Counts should get at least 2 of them, especially from the mid to the late game. So for me, they are definitely a very great unit to consider in your army. And then we have the Varghulf, that is the biggest monster here, even if probably one of the most little monsters in the game. It is this single entity giant beast with mid armor, especially for the standard of the undead monsters. And it's quite fast, as fast as heavy cavalry, I would say. The melee attack and melee defense are quite great, but the weapon strength is of course high, but not that much, not at the same level of the other monsters in the game. Of course, with the armor piercing damage, an actually great charge bonus. It has the immunity to flanking and the hunger, so it will replenish the hit points when engaged in melee. Now, I think you should consider to take it for your late game army, but yes, it's probably not the best monster ever. The best part is the regeneration, that, believe me, it will cause some troubles to the enemy, and I know it because I've been an enemy of this monster, and yeah, it's very hard to take down, because even when you get close, then it will start to replenish the hit points, so you have to do all the job again, and it's quite elusive, very fast. So yeah, it's definitely not the easiest target. That's why I think even if the price is one of the highest in the roster, it's a very worthy option. And then, as last monster, we have the Terrorgeist. That is, again, this giant monster, but compared to the other flying monsters in the game, it's actually quite little. It's very fast with plenty of armor. The melee attack and melee defense are great with the poison effect that will reduce the stats of the enemy. The weapon strength is very high. I'm saying very high, with armor piercing damage, the bonus versus large, because this unit is supposed to hunt down other flying beasts or monsters and so on. It got the regeneration that will replenish the hit points independently if this unit is engaged in melee or not. And then there is this magical missile that is a breath ability, basically, that when he's flying and he's out of melee, he can just cause this powerful explosion that is great against one single unit. So you can just address an infantry, a unit of melee infantry, for example, and believe me, is quite great, quite versatile. The price of course is very high, but you can use it both as a damage absorber, because it has the regeneration, or as a predator, so to hunt down other monsters of the same kind in the knot, and then even for the magical missile, so as a support. I think yes, that it's a polyhedric unit, and I quite like it, but for me it's more probably in the situational area, because as a flying unit I would still prefer the Vargheist. Now let's talk about the units coming with the DLC, the Grim and the Grave, that was released back in Total War Warhammer 1, so you can decide whether to buy the DLC or not. Let's start with the generic Lord option, the Strigoi Gold King, that is both a melee specialist, a particularly tough one, and a spellcaster. As a spellcaster, he will get access to a selection of spells from the Lord of Magic of Death and from the Lord of Magic of the Vampires, that in my opinion is a good combo. Then he will get this ability called the Command of the Unliving, where he will be able to summon a unit of Crypt Ghouls. That is great and definitely better than the other summons options. In the melee, he will get the Hunger, that basically it's a regeneration ability when he's engaged in melee. The armor is quite low, but the melee attack is excessively high, because it's 75 by default with the the poison effect that will reduce the stats of the enemy. The weapon strength is quite high and ammo piercing, and in the late campaign, when he will unlock this mount, he will be able to ride a Terrorgeist, that is this flying giant monster, and it's probably the most offensive alternatives amongst all the different generic lords, and I like it because especially if you have to deal with other monsters or characters, it's a really great option and it's fun to use. Now let's talk about the units themselves, and basically you will get plenty of magic chariots with this DLC, and the first and the most generic version is the corpse cart, that is a magic machine that is very slow and very weak in melee. That's why the only job is to stay as close as possible to the melee front line to grant some bonuses that, in my opinion, they don't make this unit worth to recruit. Let's say that there is this regeneration, but it affects only the unit itself and not the allies. And then basically the reason why you should recruit this unit in theory is this buff ability called the Vigor Mortis that will increase the melee defense, the melee attack and the vigor replenishment of all the allies within a range of 35 meters. That it's nothing, okay, it's very little, it's basically only the unit at the right and the unit at the left, maybe a hero if it's just around there, but I doubt it. And yes, I mean, I really don't see the point of recruiting this unit. Is very weak, so even if you can keep it well protected behind your front line, it will be very easy for the enemy to just circle you around with a fast unit, with a flying unit, and to attack it. So yeah, for me, really not useful. The second version is the corpse cart with the Balefire, that is actually the same with this additional ability called the Balefire that will grant the flaming attacks, the magical attacks and the flame resistance to all the allies within the range of 35 meters. And even here I don't know how useful it is, because it's more your enemies that should get this augment, because many of your units have the regeneration, so they will be weaker to flaming attacks, and many of your units have the physical resistance, so they will be weaker to magical attacks. So this is an ability that your enemies, okay, the Empire, Bretonia, the dwarves should have, not you, okay? So I really don't understand why they got this ability. And then there is the final version, that is the corpse cart with the Unholy Lodestone, that has this additional ability called the Unholy Lodestone that will heal and increase the leadership of all the allies, again within a range of 35 meters. Now, amongst all the corpse cards, this is in my opinion the most effective, because at least it will replenish the hit points of your troops, making them more resilient, and it still, you know, give the Mortis, the Vigor Mortis increase, so they will get more melee defense, melee attack, and better vigor recovery. So in my opinion, this is the only version, even if it's a little more expensive. But yes, in this case you can recruit it, but at the same time you have to be very careful, because as I said, it's quite weak against any kind of attack from the missile infantry, from some flying units. So yes, I mean, there are some strengths, but at the same time many weaknesses. Now let's talk about the last unit, the Mortis Engine, that it's one of the most elite and expensive units in this roster. When you have a look at it, you may think that this is a melee unit, but believe me, it's not, even if the stats may suggest you otherwise, because there is the anti-infantry bonus, the ammo piercing damage. This is not a unit you should engage in melee, you can believe me. The armor is quite little, there is no physical resistance, even if the idea of this ghost chariot may resemble this. It has the strider, so it will be faster on the hills, on the forest, but I mean, believe me, it's still a support unit that you should keep behind your army to grant its bonuses. There are some abilities, for example, the Reliquary Corruption, that is a direct damage in an area of 35 meters to all the enemies. Then the Blasphemous Tome, that will help the power recharge of your Winds of Magic, and the Reliquary Binding, that will heal your, the troops that are within the range of 35 meters. So many different abilities, and probably all together they are not that bad. My problem with this unit is that it's very expensive, okay? It's so expensive, and I really don't know if at this level of the price you cannot just buy, a Varghulf or some Vargheists that are even cheaper. So I think, yes, there are better options, and yes, there are not big reasons to recruit it. I know that many Vampire Counts fans probably have something to say, and please say it in the comments. But yes, definitely not my favorite, even if the model itself looks cool, and I like the idea and the concept of the support units. In this last chapter, I will show you the Regiment of Renown units, and I will point out the differences between the generic unit and the special one. Let's start with the Koningstein Stalkers, that is the Regiment of Renown version of the Skeleton Warriors, and they will get the poison effect that will reduce the stats of the enemies, and more armor, plenty more of armor. That is great because it will make this unit far more resilient. The Tithe is the Regiment of Renown version of the zombies, and they will get more armor, the physical resistance, and some maces as weapons in the model. Then we have the Feasters in the Dusk, that is the Regiment of Renown version of the Crypt Ghouls, that they will get more speed and the Frenzy attribute that will increase their stats when the leadership is higher than the 50%. Then we have the Sternsmen, that is the Regiment of Renown version of the Graveguard. They will get the regeneration, that is great to be more resilient, and the Expert Charge Defense, so against all, not only against large units. That is great because, yeah, they will be more defensive, and they can absorb better the charge of some cavalry monsters, and even some very high charging melee infantry, like the Corn units, for example. Then we have the Vargheists Reavers, that is the Regiment of Renown version of the Black Knights, that they will get in addition the regeneration attribute, so they will replenish their hit points, but they will suffer also of some weakness to fire damage. Then we have the Chillgeist, that is the Regiment of Renown version of the Hex Wraiths, that they will lose the fire, the flaming attacks, but they will get this ability called the Chilling Aura, that will reduce the speed of 30% of all the enemies within a range of 35 meters. So very great if you are chasing down some routing cavalry and other units. And at the end we have the Devils of Schwarzhafen, I don't know if I pronounced it correctly, that is the Regiment of Renown version of the Vargheists, and they will get the Vanguard deployment, and they will cause terror instead of only fear. That, at the end it doesn't change that much. Thank you for following me, and see you very soon. Then we get the Dire Pack, that is the Regiment of Renown version of the Dire Wolves, that they will basically get the anti-large bonus, so they will be better at hunting down cavalry. Then we have the Claw of Nagash, that will come with the DLC, the Grim and the Grave, that will get the spell resistance of 25%, and again the Chilling Aura, so they will reduce the speed of all the enemies within the range of 35 meters.